Starry Impression, Griseo Psychic Type, Physical Support Battlesuit. Her leader skill increases the team's physical damage against bleeding enemies. The team also starts with bonus initial SP. Her basic attacks are melee, deal physical damage, and have 5 sequences. At SS, the 3rd and 5th sequences will increase Starry Impression's physical damage by 35% for 6 seconds. This buff can be refreshed. With her ASP skill, all her attacks will cause enemies to bleed. Due to her unique passive ability, her basic attacks can also gain paint stacks. At the start of every battle, she will start with 1 stack of each color. Starry Impression will enter the field with the default color being red and the other 2 being yellow and blue. Tapping on the ultimate button will allow her to switch between colors. Her controls can be seen as similar to Fuhua battlesuits, where the attack button is A and the ultimate button is B. Tapping A consecutively will execute the entire basic attack sequence in the same color. Tapping B consecutively will execute the entire basic attack sequence in alternating colors. Though it might be hardly used, rotating between A and B will not restart the attack sequence. She can gain a paint stack on the currently equipped color when her basic attack hits an enemy. Paint stacks will provide mixing buffs according to the color obtained. Red will provide increased total damage by 20% against enemies with broken shields or enemies who do not possess shields. Yellow will decrease incoming total damage by 15%. And blue will increase the physical damage dealt by bleeding trauma from Starry Impression by 35%. Mixing buffs are refreshed every time a color is gained. If the color gauge is full, no new colors can be gained. By holding the attack button, Starry Impression will perform her combo attack. The attacks used will be based on the mixing stacks at hand. If there are less than 3 paint stacks, or if there are less than 3 colors available, Mr. Knight will knock enemies airborne, dealing physical damage. If all 3 colors are available, Mr. Knight will swing his heavy sword forward, dealing a high amount of physical damage to enemies in front of him. Combo attacks can restore additional SP based on the number of colors consumed. Additionally, if the paint of more than 1 color is consumed, the physical damage of the combo attack will be increased according to the amount of paint stacks. The color with the highest stack will be used to determine the strength of the damage increase. Furthermore, the additional physical damage dealt will be considered as bleed damage. After casting a combo attack, Starry Impression will gain a prismatic bubble, which lasts for 10 seconds. It will negate 1 incoming attack and will explode and deal physical damage right after blocking the hit, or when its duration ends. At SS, Prismatic Bubble can accumulate up to 2 layers. Starry Impression will also gain increased resistance to interruption and receive 30% less incoming total damage for 10 seconds after a bubble is popped. With 75 SP, Starry Impression will be able to cast her ultimate attack, Neverland Genesis, by holding the attack button, manifesting a huge self-completing painting which will last for 18 seconds. While active, teammates will be able to inflict bleed trauma with their attacks at a 2-second cooldown. The maximum amount of paint stacks will also be increased to 5. The died status will also be inflicted on enemies, causing all bleed damage to only come from Starry Impression. 10 seconds after deployment, Neverland Genesis will attack enemies in its area with an attack that counts as bleed damage. This damage can be further amplified with each additional stack of bleed trauma on an enemy. If Starry Impression leaves the field while Neverland Genesis is active, her mixing buff will be granted to teammates and their duration will be refreshed. Additionally, upon cast, bleed trauma will be inflicted on enemies and they will passively take increased damage. Inflicting more bleed trauma stacks will further increase the bleed damage enemies take. Teammates will also enter the trace state, increasing the amount of bleed trauma stacks enemies can be inflicted with by 4, while also increasing the bleed damage they take by 15% per stack. When enemies are time-slowed or inflicted with bleed by teammates, Starry Impression's QTE can be triggered. She'll enter the field, dealing physical damage, restoring 6 SP for the entire team, and obtain 1 paint of every color. The switch cooldown of the teammate switching out for her will also be decreased by 4 seconds. By performing an ultimate evasion, Starry Impression's evasion skill can be used. It will trigger a global time fracture that lasts for 2 seconds and will allow her to start attacking from the 3rd basic attack sequence. In addition, a prismatic bubble will be activated. Besides her active abilities, Starry Impression has an extensive set of passive skills that bolster her support capabilities. Against biotype enemies, she innately deals 40% more total damage and bleeding damage. The team also gains a passive 10% total damage increase against biotype enemies. At S, she can start the battle with 40 initial SP. Her SSP skill causes unshielded enemies to take increased physical damage when bleeding. Her double SSP skill enables bleed damage to affect damage-type shields. And finally, her Triple-S SP skill increases the critical rate of the team when attacking bleeding enemies, with the bonus increasing with every bleed stack. Starry Impression herself will also gain physical damage. Being a cross-wielder, Starry Impression does have multiple options when it comes to weapons. With that being said, her signature weapon does come with a character condition ability, making it the prime weapon of choice. Elysian Astra, Heart's Color, will deal physical damage and bleed trauma to nearby enemies when deployed. When equipped on Griseo, her QTE will automatically deploy to cross, and deploying to cross can force trigger her evasion skill. Passively, it increases the physical damage of its wielder's combo attack and ultimate attacks. It also increases the team's physical damage by 20%. If another teammate is equipped with the same weapon, this passive ability will not stack. The second weapon passive will increase the bleed damage dealt by the wielder. For 22 seconds after the cross is deployed, enemies with broken shields or without shields to begin with will take increased physical damage. This debuff can be refreshed. In addition, the wielder will also gain the ability to cause paint explosions on enemies when the wielder's attacks hit. The paint explosions deal physical damage to the target and enemies around it. For captains who do not possess Elysian Astra Heart's Color, the best alternative would be Hecate Sombre due to its ability to cause enemies to take increased physical damage when deployed. It also has a high number of hits, which is useful against enemies with high hit count shields. The next best alternative would be the 11th Liturgia, granting a critical rate increase to nearby teammates when deployed and passively increasing the team's SP charging speed. Zither's Lament can also be a great alternative, increasing the physical damage of teammates when deployed, while passively increasing the physical damage of teams' ultimates and burst mode attacks. Making full use of her bleed trauma infliction and low SP cost ultimate attack, Seizan, her signature Stigmata set, comes in with strong team physical damage buffs and debuffs. The T part increases the host's physical damage by 15%. When anyone in the team casts an ultimate damage dealt by the team will be increased by 27%. This buff can only be triggered once every 10 seconds. The M part increases the bleed trauma applied by the host's attacks by 25%. When enemies take bleed damage, the bleed damage they take is increased by 20% for 10 seconds. This debuff can be refreshed. The B part enables the host combo attacks to inflict the structure outline debuff on enemies, causing them to take 36% more total damage for 6 seconds, but at a 16-second cooldown. Additionally, teammates will be given an enhancement that will be consumed when they enter the field, extending the duration of structure outline by 1.5 seconds for up to a maximum of 9 seconds. Structure outline can be stacked up to 2 times. The 2-set ability provides the host with a counter that increases every time the host inflicts bleed trauma on enemies. At 10 stacks, an attack dealing physical damage will be dealt on the enemy being targeted at the time. This attack will enter a 5-second cooldown after it is used. During cooldown, no stacks can be gained. Additionally, when equipped on Griseo, and when the B part is present, it enables structure outline to be inflicted on enemies with her ultimate attack. It also causes enemies to take increased total damage by 36% for 12 seconds after structure outline's duration ends, but also places structure outline in a 20-second cooldown. And finally, the 3-set ability innately increases the host's attack speed by 35%. When the host casts an ultimate attack, the team will deal increased physical damage on enemies based on the number of bleed trauma stacks they've been inflicted with at 2% per stack, up to a maximum of 10% increased physical damage for 20 seconds. This buff can be refreshed but cannot be stacked. When looking for alternative Stigmata, Starry Impression's kit allows her to utilize almost all physical and general support Stigmata, which means captains should equip her based on what they have at hand. With her ability to easily inflict bleed trauma, she's able to utilize Stigmata like Holmes when it comes to looking for alternatives. Searching T with Holmes M and B can also be put to good use with her kit. Depending on availability, Shreejing's full set or T and B with May Beach Party M can also work really well. Gustav T and M with Newton B can also work, but preferably with her signature weapon for easy cross-deployment. With her low SP cost on her ultimate attack, Beethoven M and B with Shreejing T could also work in cases where the DPS is a melee one. And finally, the all-purpose Theresa Gluttony T, May Beach Party M, and Newton B is a good combination that makes any support viable. For team composition, Starry Impression can be paired with any existing physical support. Because Starry Impression herself does not require a long amount of time on the field, Dihasha of Sentience will make an excellent primary support to be paired with her. With her strengths in shield breaking, Sweet and Spicy will also come in handy. Though a little older, Yamabuki Armor herself or Drive Kometa with Briarea's PRI or Star Shredder with Vikrant could come in handy, but newer captains might not choose to invest their weapon upgrade materials on her at this point in time. And lastly, while somewhat viable, options like Starlight Astrologos and the Celestial Hymn might see some use in a team with Starry Impression, but because two crosses cannot be deployed on the field at the same time, their effectiveness level will be brought down. As such, unless out of options, having two cross-wielding supports in the team is not advisable. Starry Impression's kit as a support is very powerful, especially when fully equipped. With her signature weapon enabling her to deploy it in more ways than one, it is a huge factor in determining her efficiency in the team. She is built for both the Abyss and the Memorial Arena, and is extremely strong in both fields, with an easy rotation, low SP cost on her ultimate attack, which is an easy trigger to her buffs, and even a leader skill with initial SP. Starry Impression is definitely a top-tier physical support battlesuit.